you were here yesterday for any of it, thank you for liking it enough to come back. Hopefully, you just got to have to put up with me again for day two as well. So hopefully we have a good time here where we get things kicked off strong. If you're joining us for the first time today, however, you picked a really, really good day to show up and a really good session to show up. We have an incredible lineup. In this first keynote, I am so excited to see what we're able to dig into. But if you know how we do things around here, we have to get started with an icebreaker. And you can thank me later. I take donations if you want to send me those my way as well. But if you forgot, Valentine's Day is on Saturday. So if you haven't gotten a gift yet, go ahead and do that now. You're welcome. I know your significant other will definitely appreciate that. Icebreaker question for the day. What's the best Valentine's gift you've either given or received? I know this is a little tricky here, right? So keep it PG. We want to keep this professional. I'm watching the chat, everyone, so be good. But go in and throw in some of those gifts there. Best gift you've given or received for Valentine's Day. Start sharing that with everyone, as well as where are you coming from today? Let us all know as we kick off the day today. But let's transition. Let's start to get into it. Yesterday, we spent a lot of time talking about what it is that AI can do, right? The tools, the tactics, the results. What are institutions doing and seeing right now? And we even had Ty kick us off with a vision of AI operating systems for institutions. But this is one of the real questions that keeps leaders like you all up at night is what does your organization need to actually run it, right? What do they need to become to actually run it? And so it's not just about adopting the new technology, it's about new governance models, redesigned roles, reimagined cross-functional structures. It's about re-architecting the entire institution for a future powered by agentic systems, which leads me to our next speaker, which honestly, a little starstruck, right? So if you've seen her on social media, you'll know that she just brings so much knowledge in the AI space. But Claire Zau here, she's the partner and AI lead at GSV Ventures. All right, this is going to take me a while to get through. She has a lot of accomplishments, y'all. Okay, so bear with me. Claire leads GSV's AI investment strategy, writes a widely read newsletter on the future of learning in the age of AI. She was named to the Forbes 30 under 30 list for venture capital in 2025. She became the youngest investor ever to make partner at GSV Ventures. You might also know her on social media as Zowie, where she's built an audience of 250,000 plus followers, breaking down the latest in tech, AI, startups for a global audience. So if you're not following her yet, I'll go ahead and give you a couple seconds to go click the follow and subscribe button. But at GSV, Claire has been at the forefront of the AI education movement, sourcing hundreds of AI companies and shaping investments across K-12, higher ed, and workforce learning. She's also played a key role in curating thought leadership for the ASU GSV Summit, the world's leading education innovation conference. I don't know if you've been there or not. I went there last year. It was incredible in San Diego. And when it comes to speaking, right, she shared the stage at the World Economic Forum, Stanford, Harvard Business School, EdTech Week, and beyond. So I want to take a moment here and have everyone give an incredible round of applause for Claire Zhao and her session of re-architecting the institution, the organizational blueprint for 2035. So everyone, give it up for Claire. Claire, thanks for coming. Actually, before I give it over to you, we've actually started this trend at these in these sessions where last year, I actually did a deep research on all the speakers and I said, hey, what does AI know about you? It's funny, we were just talking about this in the back room. You're like, I'm okay if people don't know my personal life. And what AI knew about you whenever I did the deep research was pretty on par with the stuff we knew, but I also had it generate a caricature of you. And so I want to share that right with the audience. And I want to hear your thoughts on what you think. Did it get it right? Did it miss? What are your thoughts? Any Easter eggs in there that you can pick out?
It's funny because I've tried to do my own caricature and it's been wildly wrong. So this is actually a lot more accurate. It caught the fencing. Fun fact is that I used to be a very serious fencer. I used to fence in undergrad at Stanford on the varsity team and traveled on behalf of the Hong Kong
That's
team
awesome.
where I'm originally from. And yeah, it caught the Hong Kong SF in the background. I've lived in a bunch of cities and a bunch of my portfolio companies in the bottom right. So This is amazing. Thank
Spot
you
on.
for, I'll have to send this to my family. They'll be surprised.
Beautiful. Yeah, yeah. I'll send it over to you after the session. But awesome, beautiful, good to see AI's doing something good here. But again, without further ado, thanks for coming, Claire, and we're excited to hear what you have for us. Floor's yours.
Thank you so much, Brendan. Just wanted to kick off by saying I am so grateful and honored to be here among this lineup of speakers. I've heard amazing things about this event, all the other events the Element 451 team has hosted, and just a big fan of the organization. I know that they've put together an amazing 2 days to get you through the actual process of moving an institution and think about higher ed in the AI era. But really, for me today, I'm here to give you all more so a 30,000-foot view of what's happening in the AI education world. So if you give me a second to share my screen. In my role as a venture capitalist, I do feel like I sit in this intersection of being deeply passionate about education, but having this unique window into what's happening in Silicon Valley as well. And I really do think right now we are going through one of the most profound platform shifts of our lifetime. A little background, Brendan did an amazing job, but I lead a lot of our AI focus and investments at GSV Ventures. For some background, we are an early stage edtech focused VC fund, and our definition of edtech is very broad. That includes everything from platforms serving educators, students, faculty, administrators, workforce leaders. And we've invested in some of the companies you'll see on the left, including Coursera, Turnitin, ClassDojo, Magic School, Handshake. And as Brendan mentioned, we do host ASU GSV every single year as a celebration of education innovation. I also write a lot, and in addition, on social media, try to share every few days or every other day a video on the latest happening in AI. This is much more generalist, but if, for example, Claude Cowork drops or, X AI and SpaceX have a merger, I'll try to cover those. So if you're trying to stay up to date with all things AI, quick 1 to 2 minute videos that you can keep up with. But really today, I want to spend my time talking about why we are experiencing what I see as a cognitive revolution right now. And I think this is really not just a tech story, but a story about labor, about economics, about education. And so if you rewind a little bit, every single platform shift we've seen has automated a new layer of human work. You saw this with the first industrial revolution, where we automated muscle. We literally replaced human and animal strength with mechanical power. And from this, you saw strength itself become scalable. And then from there, because of that, we went from a largely agriculture-oriented culture to the rise of the industrial labor class, right? If you looked at the 1800s, if we were all transported back to the 1800s, 1700s, the majority of us would have been working in agriculture. However, you saw this massive shift where new jobs like factory workers, machinists, engineers, train operators. And then you saw this second wave where we actually saw coordination on an industrialized level. And that meant that factories turned craft into process. So this wasn't just when we outsourced strength, we were also outsourcing certain levels of craft. And in many ways, people became cogs in this larger machine and supply chain. And from there, we saw the rise of assembly line operators, managers, supervisors, logistics workers. And then came the computer, which automated calculation. And that gave us digital tools that allowed us to extend our cognitive reach. And what we saw from this was, again, a new set of jobs, the rise of knowledge work and the information economy, jobs like programmers, accountants, analysts, this large shift of people working from factories to now white collar work in offices. And now today we're at another next new frontier where data centers are actually producing new factory floors for intelligence. And one thing to note is compared to that previous automation, these machines aren't just for storing information or digitizing things. They're actually potentially helping to think with us and maybe dangerously soon for us. But what we're seeing from this is, again, a new emergence of a new class of machine collaborators, humans directing cognitive systems. And out of that, I think jobs like AI engineers, prompt designers, data labelers, digital labor managers. And I'll go into why I think that will happen. But one thing I really want to stress today is also how much of a new paradigm this introduces. The fact that we as a species are able to produce intelligence, like units of intelligence. We've been able to produce units of strength, but now this ability to produce units of intelligence. And for decades, automation only meant efficiency. So you had a machine or a piece of software that helped humans move faster, type faster, sell faster. But in this era, I think what's different is you're no longer selling software as a service, but rather the service itself is the software. It's the AI. So AI is the worker. We're not necessarily buying tools anymore. We are actually buying labor sometimes. And you see this in the physical world too. For the first time ever recently, data center construction is actually overtaking office construction. And I'll go a little bit deeper into how we're now potentially even moving some of these data centers into space with Elon Musk's recent plan to do that in the next 36 months. But we are essentially building more spaces for intelligence to work than for humans to work, which I think is actually a crazy thing to think about. And so that means these factory floors for the next century aren't just going to be made of concrete for offices. They're literally going to be made of data center compute. And so to understand how we got here and how we got to producing these units of intelligence, I want to kind of walk through this evolution of machine intelligence in a simple way. There are a lot of fancy words, but we've been thinking about AI since the 1950s, since the era of Turing, of John McCarthy. But we've really gone through 4 big phases, and I think this is a much more simpler way to think about that evolution. This specific image is screenshotted from Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA's keynote at CES, the Consumer Electronics Show last year, and he basically laid it out in 4 big stages. First was perception AI, which was systems that can see, hear, and classify. So they don't necessarily create new content, but they can analyze existing content. So you can think of things like Siri, of image classifiers. These systems were algorithms that could recognize patterns, and that meant that they could develop speech to text, self-driving prototypes. However, these things couldn't reason or create, right? Like we've had ImageNet, we've had Siri, we've had facial recognition, traditional machine learning for a very long time. AI is not new in that sense. We've had it powering our society for a very long time. Even in New York City, AI is used to filter water. So this has existed for a long time. However, in the last 2 years, in 2022, 2023, that's when we saw generative AI, this next evolution, where AI wasn't just going about analyzing existing data, it was actually creating entirely new outputs. So for the first time ever, AI could create new text, new images, music, even video. And just to show you how far we've gone, in the AI world, we have this sort of informal benchmark that I constantly track, but it's Will Smith eating spaghetti. And it came about because in 2023, someone tried to use Stable Diffusion to create a video of Will Smith eating spaghetti. And as you can see from here, the video turned out pretty bad. His hands do not look like hands. His face is totally deformed. That does not look like Will Smith. And the food does not behave like food. You can see the spaghetti is operating in weird ways. It doesn't understand physics or emotion. And now I want to show you what got outputted from Google's most recent VO 3.1 model today. And I want you to know that the difference between what you're seeing here and what I'm about to show you is only a matter of 2.5 years.
I can't get enough of this.
So big difference from this to this. 2.5.
I can't get enough of this.
And with Sora 2, which comes from OpenAI, you now have cinematic quality videos created just from one prompt. This did not require a studio. This was one person with a prompt creating a full 20-second cinematic video. And you have even entire Top Chef snippets, again, created by one user with one single prompt, no editor. They're not even piecing together an AI speech model with a video model. This is just from one Sora model.
You give me luminous kelp noodles, charred star lobster, a nebula foam. It looks spectacular. But the flavor? The foam tastes like battery acid. The noodles are slimy and they're afraid of salt. The star lobster's cooked to rubber.
Sad. And you can even put Sam Altman in any clothing you want, again, with one prompt.
This was all generated using only one prompt.
And even in dangerously, you can also make him conduct a heist of GPUs, which we know are very expensive right now. Oh, the video is not loading, but you can see how people can manipulate sort of videos to even pretend or fake someone stealing something or committing crimes. So that leaves us with some questions that we'll tackle later. But the next phase after this is agentic AI. And I want to say this is really where we're at today. These are systems that can plan multi-step workflows. So unlike generative AI, where you're sitting there and you give it a prompt and it outputs its input, output, these are systems that can plan multi-step. So they can execute toward a goal, and you don't need to sit there and handhold them or copy and paste information. I'm sure a lot of you have used co-pilots where you constantly have to iterate, but these agents just proactively do and act. They can call APIs, they can click through workflows, they adapt as they go. And that's the big difference, is that AI is no longer just, copy and paste, input, output. These are systems that can plan for hours on end and adapt as they're working through a problem. And big tech is going all in on this. You see why people at these labs are investing so heavily in computer use, which means that AI can now click, they can scroll, they know it, the systems know how to copy and paste even. And even speaking of a computer use and applying it, OpenAI, for example, dropped a browser where you can see your screen and it can summarize the page. You can ask questions. It's agentic, so you can, for example, pull data from one Google Sheet and input it in an email. And it also has memory, so you can literally ask it things like, what job postings did I look at last week? So the future is AI not as a separate interface, but AI really embedded in your exact flow of work. And in the coding world, you had Claude 4 that was able to, refactor code for 8 hours straight. My software engineer friends now give Cursor or Devin or Claude Code prompts and instructions. They go to bed for 8 hours and they wake up with work of an entire team on their plate delivered for them. And you can even see AI playing video games like Pokemon on its own for hours now. One thing I constantly track is from this group called Meter, and they basically measure the length of tasks that AI can operate autonomously. And what they see is that that number doubles every 7 months. So in 2019, AI could only handle tasks that took humans a few seconds, things like answering trivia, counting words, sorting through things. Today, it can actually reliably complete multi-hour long software engineering projects. So you can see the insane curve. I would highly recommend looking at Meter. There's a lot of fascinating research there. And on a product side, you're seeing companies like 11x or Artisan literally branding their products as AI employees. So in many ways, Silicon Valley is selling AI as labor, as digital workers, and it's coming for everything. Finally, the last phase that was laid out in that 4-part graph is physical AI. And I think this is where we're still relatively nascent, and this is the next frontier, but it does really show you what happens when you merge all the intelligence I was speaking about with perception, reasoning, movement. What happens when you let this intelligence move and exist and manipulate the physical world? And you see early signs of this already. Waymo recently reached 10 million robo-taxi trips, double in 5 months. You're seeing examples of parents secretly trusting Waymo way more than human drivers to shuttle their kids to school. And in many ways, there are benefits. You're seeing Waymos leading to 91% fewer serious injuries and crashes among other stats, because we know that humans are not necessarily the most safe drivers. You're seeing Amazon announcing that they want to replace more than 500,000 jobs with robots. We'll see how this plays out. But just to show you where we are with some of these humanoids, this is a demo I'm about to show you from a company called 1X, which is designed to help you at home. And one thing to note here is none of this is pre-programmed. There is no human on the other side teleoperating. It is able to dynamically move based off of visual inputs it's receiving, plug that into a world model, a physical intelligence model, and able to understand physics and pick up the facts through that. Or you have companies like Sunday Robotics that are deploying these in homes, again, very early and very nascent here. But the fact that you have robots that can now manually carry wine glasses, which historically, just from a technical level, has been really difficult because wine glasses are fragile. They're see-throughs, which is really hard for computers to understand, and they're often reflective. And so you're seeing these massive multi-step workflows where they're able to combine motion, completely new environments, and really difficult technical problems like wine glasses, laundry. We're really moving very quickly on that frontier as well. And we even had our first humanoid fight night in China a few months ago. So we may see this as a new category of sports in a dystopian way. In terms of where we sit around where funding is going, what we're really seeing is a gold rush, naturally, and AI without a doubt dominating venture capital and investing today, simply because that upside is too big to miss out on. You have companies like Periodic Labs raising $300 million to create a self-driving R&D lab. So imagine just a self-running R&D lab, constantly churning out scientific discoveries. Ex-OpenAI folks like Ilya Sutskever and Mira Murati, the ex-CTO of OpenAI, separately raising $2 billion seed rounds on their own. For reference, most of the seed rounds that we're writing are $2 million checks. So kind of insane to see $2 billion investments in these AI labs. And the reason you're seeing that is because of exactly what I laid out earlier around producing this next frontier of intelligence. At the same time, I also get a lot of questions about the potentially bubbly behavior of this ecosystem. And it's very valid looking even just at this graph. Because as you can see here, between OpenAI, NVIDIA, Oracle, Microsoft, Intel, there's a lot of circular financing happening here. And in response to this, I think it truly is playing out in real time. But I do think, as of every major technological revolution we've seen, railroads, electricity, the internet, all of these major revolutions created real wealth. But with wealth and value, naturally, there are a lot of speculators and opportunists. You even saw this with the railroads and gold rush. So I think in many ways, if the tech wave is real, bubble-like behavior that we're seeing today is inevitable because, I think with any sort of opportunity, there will always be inflated expectations and speculation. So I wouldn't, at least in my view, say that there is that much of a debate between whether AI is real versus AI is a bubble, because if anything, these things come together. And I think how I think about it is you compare this to the dot-com bubble. There will be web vans and there will be Googles, but you also saw out of the dot-com bubble funding the internet that we still use today. It led to Instacart, Facebook, Amazon. So a lot of the major predictions that came out of dot-com bubble, even though you did have your losers, ultimately came true if you think about the internet that we use today. And so there can be genuine technological transformation, but also massive speculation at the same time. And that's something that we all will have to navigate: what's real, what's not, what's hype. In terms of where we're heading, there are a couple of things I'm thinking about in this moment. I view AI as a Promethean fire. So it's in the same way that fire can warm your home, it can burn it down. It also enables civilization, but also destruction. I think AI also has the same duality. It's not as binary in the same way that there's not a binary AI bubble. I also don't think it's a binary AI is good or bad. We know that this technology can solve very complex problems that humanity is facing. It can accelerate scientific discovery. It can enhance human potential. But there are also risks of displacement, misuse, a lot of unintended consequences. So one of the big things I'm thinking a lot about is just the core purpose of education. And we know that in classrooms today, AI is already rewriting the rules. So, this piece went viral last year, but about 80% of students admit to using AI for assignments, and not because they want to cheat, but because the assignments themselves feel irrelevant. And so the big thing we're constantly thinking about is if ChatGPT can earn an A, there's question about what those assignments were really measuring in the first place, especially when you think about multiple choice questions. And so in many ways, it shows you that if AI systems, which are highly capable at rote memorization and just outputting and identifying patterns, it might be a sign that our systems, existing systems, were rewarding memorization and not necessarily meaning or metacognition. And so we have to really think about what it means for education to cultivate judgment, curiosity, connection, as opposed to just stuffing information in students. And if you think about the potential for a way to track AI cheating, my skepticism sits at one, just that AI detectors today do not often work because they trigger false positives against ESL and neurodivergent students. And I just think it ends up in this kind of rat's race between students using AI to cheat, educators using AI to detect AI, on and on. And there are even startups today that are raising, $15 million for their cheating manifesto. There's a company called Cluely out there that a lot of adults, students, people use, and they allow you to cheat on everything. It's literally a layer that sits on top of your computer. And even if you want to go through a live interview, your interviewer can throw you any question. Yeah, you do not have any knowledge of what that question will be. However, because that AI system can hear and see what's on your screen, it can say, based off of that, you should say this to the interviewer, and you should type these things for your coding interview. So that's the world we live in, and I do think it's a little bit of an arms race. And you're even entering a world where you can even cheat on dates and have AI help you answer your date questions in real time. And this is all coming at a time when there are huge questions about what AI is doing for our metacognition. I have some thoughts on this specific study, but I do think it raises really important questions around whether or not we're losing our ability to learn how to learn, especially when AI systems are so easily putting the answers in front of us. So a couple of things I would love for you all to think about as you head into this day. Questions around if ChatGPT can earn an A on an assignment, what was that task really measuring in the first place? How do we help cultivate judgment, curiosity, human connection? And in a world where every student has access to essentially, an AI companion in their glasses, who knows, maybe when we all have brain-computer interfaces, it'll just have an AI embedded in our brains. How do you actually measure capability in that world? Is it through portfolios of work? Is it real-world projects? The other big thing we're thinking about is just beyond school, how AI continues to shape our social lives, how we grow up and interact as humans. We know that students are talking to chatbots for therapy, companionship, even friendship. And it's not just young students, it's adults too. AI girlfriends and boyfriends are one of the most lucrative businesses that frequently top the AI consumer charts. So it's impacting everyone. And I'm assuming many of you have seen the movie Her. And when there's demand, that a lot of these labs and tech companies will certainly build it. Just a few weeks ago, Sam Altman said that ChatGPT would soon bring erotica to ChatGPT once it verifies your age. XAI actively is building and promoting AI anime waifus or girlfriends. And there's also more harmless versions of this too that move downstream. So even to our youngest learners, you're seeing AI companions be pitched as a home product, as friends. But it's also leading to tragic and adverse situations like a 14-year-old taking his own life after building a relationship with a character AI chatbot. And we're basically entering a world where it's not just chatbots. You can essentially fabricate and exist in multiple realities. And so if we're entering a world where seeing is no longer believing, there's a lot of big questions around how we as institutions, schools, families teach truth. Again, this is Google VO3. All 4 of these parts of these videos are AI generated, again, with simple prompts. So you can see how far we've come in AI video generation. You can even, create any, of women blogging. You can create a court scene. You can create a late night talk show. You can pretend that politicians are saying things. And so we do need to prepare a generation that can navigate this very blurred line between that simulation and what's real. I'm curious about what it means to bring this kind of new evidence of standard into classrooms or even society at large, and just questions around how we regulate, how we teach students to spot and respond to synthetic media. Even bigger questions around if we're all living in worlds of personalized AI generated content, like if we all have our own personalized Netflix episodes, what happens to our shared realities? Are we heading towards certain truth silos? And I think, a question that I've gotten a lot of pushback on too is having an AI therapist or a friend better than having no support at all? And so there are all these great questions there. More questions than answers, but things to think about today. And naturally, we have to talk about the labor realignment because that is making the headlines and we're seeing it impact in real time. AI is starting to remove some early entry-level rungs from the traditional career ladder. There is some level of, I want to say, AI washing by big tech companies like Amazon that overhired during the pandemic, cutting down. But you are seeing the unemployment rate for recent graduates at the highest it's been in decades, historically high in relation to the general unemployment rate. So that is true. And you also have recent Stanford papers, research from Eric Brynjolfsson, who's one of the best in human labor research and labor data research, put out a paper that shows that early career workers in AI exposed jobs have seen a 13% decline in employment. And yet you have a lot of people that are now entering the labor force that have paid a lot of money to with the promise of a stable career. While Gen Z, nearly half of Gen Zs and millennials say that college was a waste of money because AI has made those degrees obsolete. And so I think there is some in between here where I don't think, you'll hear a lot of fear mongering and headlines around how, Anthropic CEO saying that half of all entry-level office jobs will disappear, or the LinkedIn executive saying that the bottom rung is completely breaking. I think there's a level of truth to that, but I also think we have more time than we think, and I'll go into that. But we do have a duty to be honest about what's coming, because if we just leave this on its own and without any sort of preparation, I think the people who have visibility into this will take advantage of the situation and opportunity, but you will see widespread inequality without preparation. You're already seeing this immediate impact to entry-level workers now, because even with the most basic version of ChatGPT, that's what it overlaps with. But what happens when these models get better? What happens when they move up the career ladder? What do we do about our organizations? And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but it really is coming for every facet. So not just basic ChatGPT displacing entry-level interns and workers, but customer service. So this is from 11 Labs, which is a voice agent. One big thing to note here is that it is able to now process expression and emotion.
Hey there, I'm Jennifer with 11 Airlines. And how can I help you today?
Jennifer, my flight just got canceled and I'm stuck here in Orlando. At this rate, I'm going to be missing my daughter's birthday. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, I hear you, and I'm so sorry about that. Let's figure out what's going on, okay? Could you please tell me which flight this was?
Yeah, this is flight MD412.
Great, thanks. Okay, just pulling that up now. Okay, yeah, I see it. 3 cancellations on one trip. That's not the experience you should be having.
And so one thing to know about that specific demo, what was interesting is I think it shows you a new way that we might interact with computers is not through clicking and typing and pressing buttons, but rather I'm seeing full applications like dating apps or recruiting apps where your only interaction with that service is through the phone. So there are now these dating apps where you're no longer swiping, you just call an agent, you give it all the things you like and what you don't like, what you're looking for, and in the back end, it's running all this stuff, and then it comes back to you with a text and a suggestion of options. So I do think this demo shows you a little bit of how we might change our human-computer interaction and ways we interact with services and computers. But I also think specifically this demo, it shows that AI agents are able to adapt in real time. They can react to your tone, your frustration, all while operating. And you can see there, the fact that we've moved very quickly from AI voice that is beep boop, very robotic, to now AI that can sigh, that can laugh, that can interrupt you in just a few years. It's coming for legal work. The startup just raised $200 million at an $11 billion valuation. They have 100,000 lawyers on their platform. And as we know, AI can do basic levels of summarization, but it can also summarize case law and draft briefs and read contracts and do legal research that rivals junior associates. And partners are using this not because it's fun, but because it's actually outperforming some associates on certain tasks. If you thought spreadsheets were safe, this is from Ramp. You can, for example, say that you're curious about the recent SpaceX and xAI merger. What you're seeing here is someone using natural language to ask the model to run a full merger model analysis. And remember, at no point is a human touching a single cell or writing any inputs. They've just shared a bunch of files, given a lot of instructions, or even verbally said what they want. And you can see this is sped up, but it's essentially outputting a few hours of work and running everything from an exchange ratio analysis, sensitivity analysis. You literally have access to a financial analyst at your fingertips. And if even in the physical world, you're seeing solar panel installation, this combination of physical intelligence plus AI multimodality. And so what I think is interesting, and I want to point out from all of these examples, is that even if you look at the legal example with Harvey, you look at the finance example, you look at customer service, at the end of the day, in order to produce a good output, a good model, you still kind of need a human who has expertise around that subject, right? Like if I've never seen a financial model before, I have no clue whether or not what that AI model or that AI model output, whether it was valid, correctly formatted. And so it's interesting because you're seeing still a need for human curation and human taste. But as it relates to the actual grunt work, we have these AI systems that are doing quite well at doing the grunt work for lawyers, for people in finance. And so big questions to consider about the rise of AI agents, what we consider essential skills in the workplace, what do AI human hybrid teams look like, and if work as we know it will even cease to exist. And so I'm through this presentation. I hope that you are not feeling like this, but I can imagine you might be feeling like this. But I want to remind us that we tend to overestimate the effect of a technology in the short run and underestimate the effect in the long run. And so there's also examples where, Anthropic gave Claude $1,000 to run a vending machine, and it ended up not even making money, but actually losing $300 in the process. So there's also comfort in knowing that, yes, AI systems are hyper intelligent at solving certain things, like being able to output an AI model or a financial model, but they're also maybe not that great entrepreneurs, and they can't even run a vending machine. So there's this sort of jagged intelligence where they're good at certain tasks, but there are still things around curation, entrepreneurship, judgment that it still falls short on. And we've been here before. I think we are seeing a future that is increasingly defined by this divide between those who can use AI to increase their productivity and those who are trying to compete against it. And I think what we'll see is a broader shift to supervisory roles where employees are managing and overseeing AI agents. They need new skills in governance, decision-making. And I think you're almost also seeing a shift from specialists to hyper generalists that can manage teams of specialist humans and AIs. Another thing to remind us of is that, in every single economic downturn and massive platform shift, it does feel like chaos in the way that it is highly unpredictable today, but it also often creates better solutions. So with the dot-com bubble, you had Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, the 2008 financial crisis, Uber, Airbnb, COVID brought about Zoom, OutSchool. And I give you this presentation not to make you feel helpless, but to show you that right now you are already in a position where your single biggest advantage you can have right now is simply being early to understanding it, early to testing it, early to adapting to it. And so practically, I think this means using AI deeply and daily. Don't just use it as a smarter search engine. That is just the floor of how you should use it. You should try use the best models available, try use the best tools available, because you can only understand AI if you build instinct for what it's good at. You need to learn where it fails, and then you can redesign your workflow around it. And if today, there's a lot of things it's still not good at, but you can be pretty certain that in years, it can achieve that, because that trajectory, as we've seen, of capability only goes in one direction. I think the most dangerous reaction you can have right now is to say that my job is too nuanced and human and complex, or this subject is too human and too nuanced. Because even if AI does not replace it 100%, if AI has the ability to help with 40% of that cognitive load, it fundamentally changes the entire market. And as leaders in higher education preparing students for those industries, that is a massive change, how people get hired for those industries. So always approaching this with a mindset of learning rather than treating it as a threat to an industry or an identity. And remembering that certain domains will be slow to AI adoption, regulated fields, healthcare, finance, law. There are still so many physical presence jobs. As much as AI can move at the speed of light digitally, there's still a physical barrier to building these data centers. But even among this, within these orgs, people who are AI literate, even in physical work, and know how to integrate these tools and evolve will remain at the frontier. And I think one thing that's abundantly clear is that we need to teach for adaptability and AI fluency. So this old formula of get good grades, go to a good college, get a stable white-collar job is completely collapsed. And what matters more now is this ability to rapidly acquire skills, having a builder mindset. Education still matters. There is no way that school or education goes away, but what matters more as a skill is adaptability and the ability to ask better questions, to iterate, to use AI to create things. And for what it's worth, it is one of the most exciting times to build. The amount of young people I've seen who are creating things and starting their own companies, because the barrier to creation has quite literally collapsed. You can now prototype apps without engineering teams. As a generalist, you can do so much more because the floor has been risen. I see so many mini entrepreneurs within their orgs. And so in many ways, AI is both good and bad because it compresses cost, time, and skills barriers. And if you know how to take advantage of that, that is an insane asymmetric upside. And I want to, place us in this broader societal framing, 30,000-foot view. We are living in an exciting sci-fi moment. You now have AI systems that can create 380,000 new materials. What does that mean for infrastructure, for humanity's progress? We have AI systems that are decoding conversations with humpback whales. AI is creating and researching or designing drugs. Recently, Google's Gemma model helped Yale researchers potentially discover a new cancer therapy pathway, so that it could turn cold tumors hot and help your immune system attack them. So you're seeing so much, actually, as much as it's not as flashy as the product updates that you see from a ChatGPT or XAI, there is a lot of research and progress being made just from AI being injected in these fields. Major tech giants like XAI, Google, Jeff Bezos are even thinking of ways to put data centers in space. Humanity is literally expanding beyond Earth. And if you want to see something super sci-fi,
Alter Ego gives you the power.
We are also on path to potentially telepathically communicate with bone induction software. So one thing to know about this demo is that it is not invasive. Nobody has to have a surgery. It is simply a device.
Alter Ego gives you the power of telepathy, but only for the thoughts you want to share. With Alter Ego, you talk just like you normally would, but without making a sound. Let me show you how it works. We all have moments when inspiration strikes and you want to save an idea before it slips away. You can now capture those instantly without lifting a finger. For example, Just gonna see if that synced. Oh yeah.
And if you want to communicate with another human, and remember, this is just you verbally thinking and mouthing words.
'मुझे आपको शंघाई दिखाने में खुशी होगी। मैं अल्टर ईगो की मदद से आपको हिंदी में एक यात्रा सुझाव दूंगा।
Other sci-fi things, if you've watched Total Recall or Fifth Element, you know, even just from an aesthetic front, we now have technology that can change your nail color instantly, and tech to make your bed. But as always, there's reminders that we're always close, but also sometimes not there yet. For example, this one is from Figure.
Hey, Figure, can you fold these towels for me?
It's learning to fold your
Sure
laundry.
thing. I'll get right on that.
Not very good at it yet. So yeah, in some ways, AI is taking and capturing certain skills, but it still can't do basic things like fold laundry. So I know I'm coming up on time, but one message I do want to leave all of you with is I've hoped I've shown you both the good and bad from this very high level view. There's a lot of exciting programming today on how you actually apply this into classrooms and institutions, but I do think it's important to emphasize that there is an AI digital divide emerging. And what we're seeing is this divide of people who don't have literacy around AI, are not exposed to it. And what ends up happening is they see AI as a shortcut. And what happens in that scenario is AI is used in its worst possible use cases as a cheating tool with shallow engagement. But when students are exposed to AI, they benefit from that asymmetrical upside. They get to be part of this future of builders. It expands their curiosity. They know how to leverage this as AI as coworkers to deeply explore new fields. And I think there's also a divide in access. What we are starting to see is certain students having access to premium subscriptions while others are stuck with free tiers. And so you're already seeing this emerging gap. And what ends up happening is that the AI literate and AI empowered students are going to enter the workforce as the designers, the managers, the decision makers and innovators, ones who know how to leverage all these AI tools. But if you're locked out of access, then you risk being relegated to a lower agency, lower skilled role. And so in this sense, I think it's important to remember that I don't want to prescribe any one way to use AI, but what I do think is important to remember is that access without literacy is dangerous. And if you offer literacy without access, that's unjust. And so this entire cognitive revolution isn't just about who has access to, about the devices or the capabilities. It's quite literally about who learns and gets exposed to and knows how to talk to the machines. And I do think universities are a place where this exact phenomenon is playing out in real time. And I'm excited, I'm nervous, I'm curious to hear how you all are thinking about it, but hope this was helpful.
Yeah, awesome, Claire, incredible presentation. Yeah, I was reading a book recently, and it was focusing on the fact of humans have this natural, just inclination to not approach things due to a fear of how it can change how they think or kind of just their framework. And so we avoid them. And so this is one of those things that I think is there's just that fear. And this was very thought-provoking, very open the doors. So we do have a lot of questions in here. We don't have time to address them all. I'm going to pick one or two that we can go over, and then we can go to a break here before our next session. But the first one that I wanted to pull out was, where was it? The fact that this happened over such a small span of time, how is it that educational institutions can keep up?
Yeah, and I get this question a lot, and I think it is unreasonable to put the onus on education institutions and educators and faculty and teachers and admin when there is so much that they are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And it is, a bit ridiculous to assume that we can upskill every single person to become, overnight an AI technologist. I do think a lot of it starts with access, right? Like, I don't think we need every single person to be an AI expert. However, I am starting to see a difference where people who have access to these tools, even just to tinker, and are spending an hour, 15 minutes a day, just trying the latest, tinkering in small ways, trying to solve for different workflows. You're starting to see that compound over time, because people who kind of just ignore it, they're staying here, but then you have people who are learning how to work alongside AI, they're learning limitations. And so I think it starts on an individual level, being open to tinkering with the technology. I think on an institutional level, it is keeping up with what's coming down the pipeline from the tech labs. And what the luxury of education and our industry is that there tends to be a nice buffer and lag, such that there is some more time to prepare. I think right now you're immediately seeing a lot of impact in software engineering as an industry. In education, there is lag time. So there's often, a couple months, a couple years of what comes down the pipe from these AI labs to start preparing for what that looks like in an education environment.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Claire. We are going to have to wrap after that. But the one last question that came in was amazing presentation, but how do we know that Claire is real? So, I mean, hold up the number 3, Claire, like give us something live and in real time. Right there we go. So she's real, David.
But I will say it's getting more and more difficult.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you again, everyone. One more big round of applause for Claire in that presentation. It was absolutely incredible. We are going to take a break here. It is only going to be about 8 minutes, but it's going to be bringing in Southeastern University, and they're going to show you what they are actually doing right now with agents in admissions. So please, please, please don't miss that one. And again, Claire, thank you so much. And everyone, don't forget to follow Claire on social and keep up with everything that she's doing. So, all right, have a good one, everyone. See you soon. Bye, Claire.